Hello, everybody. Welcome back to All Our Parts. Welcome to All Our Parts. If you are new here, I am so excited for my guest. She is owner, founder of Ritual Daily Club, therapist, and just an overall baddie. Like, I love your TikToks, love the Instagram presence. Melissa, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for your beautiful welcome.
I've been having a lot of conversations around abundance, especially within entrepreneurship, and having conversations where people are like, I'm putting so much energy into my business and I'm not seeing the results that I was hopeful for. I feel like I'm hustling without any direction, really. And so I wanted to really just talk about what it means, what it looks like to be in an energetic frequency where you are both putting in and receiving in your business.
There's a lot of keywords that you said that I love that I'm like happy to unpack already, like things like hustle and chasing and then frequency. I think all of those things we can have a lot of fun with on this topic for sure.
Absolutely. So, just to start, how do you teach abundance mindset to people?
I think it's, my gosh, there's a lot of things to cover when you really start speaking about an abundance mindset. It starts on the inside. And I think a lot of people, when they think about abundance, they're going to speak about or relate to money right away, which I mean is great. Of course, abundance does equal money. But I think the way that I like to teach it and the way that I like for people to move towards it is through the embodiment of feelings. And I think
Mm,
that's where people get caught up, not understanding why, for example, their business won't work or why they're depleted, they're exhausted, they're tired from the hustle and the chase and the trying different things.
mhm.
That for me is something that's happening on the outside. We're trying to change the outcome of something on the outside first through action, when really, in essence, it begins on the inside first.
Mm,
And so I think for me, the way that I teach it is, especially with the NLP space, what we do is we really focus on rewiring the subconscious beliefs and identifying first of them first. Like first and foremost, we identify them to see what we have to reframe and unlearn. And I think that's where people, fall short. They skip that part. They think abundance, they think money, they think action,
mhm.
and then they start chasing and then they get in the hustle. And so for me, it's like take a step back and let's understand, first of all of your core beliefs around money, abundance, what that means, because you want to be able to do the inner work first and become an energetic match to it. And that's what people don't do. People think it's an outside thing. And the thing is, when you think about it, the best way I can explain it, and this is like, it's almost like analyzing things through data, is
Mhm.
if my formula that I've been applying right now, which maybe involves working harder, chasing, this is my to-do list that I've been doing, and this is how I am like operating. It's giving me Y, let's say, as a result, right?
Mhm.
And so in essence, you can't change the outcome by really just applying the same mindset that got you there. People are thinking, okay, I got to change the formula, but it's not. It's your
Mm.
mindset that got you there. So I think abundance really is not about what you're going to acquire, but it's the embodiment, it's the being process first and foremost, if that makes
Mm.
sense.
Yeah, I'm listening and I especially hear you highlighting that abundance is not an external process. It is not
Not
something that
first.
we can chase. It's something that we try to make strategic and formulaic when in essence, abundance at first it starts on the inside. It starts with the internal work.
Yeah, it's all about being versus doing. And the more that you change your inner being, then the way that you're going to then show up and take action will be more about alignment to what it is that you want versus the chasing and the hustle. You
Mhm.
know, I think a lot of people, especially women, we try to operate from a very linear space, and we're not linear beings. We're very cyclical. And so the more that we're in this chase and the hustle and the grind, for me, what all of that equals scarcity.
Mm.
because you're pedestalizing something and you're chasing after it, which means you're only repelling it, right?
Yeah.
And you enter this state of need. And when you need something, it means that you're incomplete. It means that you're in lack. And so
Hmm.
for me, I really am very careful to I'm careful to teach it in the sense of it has to come from the inside. It really has to. You have to shift those undertones, the underwaters, the limiting beliefs, all of the things that you were programmed to believe.
Hmm.
First and foremost growing up. People don't realize that your subconscious mind is really the goal getter.
Hmm.
That makes sense. And your conscious mind is where you're going to take your regular decisions from, like, I need to take this action or I want this. It's almost like the goal setter, right? And the reason why people are not getting the outcome that they want is because there's misalignment with the belief systems that is running the show, which is all in the subconscious area. And so we find ourselves after that in that endless chase of like doing more,
Hmm.
expecting more results when really we're just depleting ourselves because we're like in scarcity. We're not in this deeper sense of alignment or taking aligned action or understanding the power of rest and relaxation. There's a million ways I can go about this, but yeah, I mean, there's just so much to cover when you are trying to embody the abundance mindset. But again, it's about rewiring first, really, your belief systems.
And I love that you bring up the conscious lessons that were taught, especially in Western society, where we're taught like in order to achieve or attract, we have to do, we have to put out, we have to hustle. Like, again, that hustle culture of we need to put ourselves out there, we need to constantly be moving, moving, moving. And to put it in the framework of repelling the thing that we want, I'm imagining like bug repellent in a way. And so
Yep.
our energy, our frequency is the bug
Mhm.
repellent, and we're so busy putting out that we don't even leave enough room for opportunity.
Exactly. And I think, one of the major things that I try to remind people of is we live amongst this like quantum field that is made up of energy, and our universe, it responds to energy. It doesn't respond to what you're doing, it responds to who you're being. And I think the second you really begin to understand that, and listen, I speak about this like it's a breeze, but it's a mastery, it's a process. And there's a lot of work in the back end that needs to happen in order to become aligned with this momentum. But once you understand it and once you're able to truly be in that like state of surrender and kind of just foundationally work on yourself, that's when
Mhm.
things begin to change. That's when you become more magnetic, it's
Yeah.
like the bug repellent effect. And if you think about the concept of like, I think we used to refer to ourselves prior to human beings, and now we're referred to as the human race.
Mm.
And I think that's so fascinating because we went from really being more in this like universe and being and working with it and being in flow with it,
Mhm.
right? And just cultivating more that art of being and probably gaining a lot more success from it to now being in this like human race hustle culture, and just like the grind or like the boss babe energy and all of these like things that really just put us at a default.
Yeah, even as you said, women being cyclical beings, I think about how so many of us are starting to work with our cycles. And so really leaning into what is nature asking us to do right now? Is it asking us to literally take a nap? And that's such a new way for women to function simply because we weren't allowed to.
Exactly. I teach a lot of neural manifestation techniques. And one of the biggest things you have to learn to do is you have to get comfortable with relaxing. And a lot of women can't do that because they feel so indoctrinated by society of the whole hustle culture where they think that I need to do more in order to be more. But then it's the opposite. It's like the more you're just going to be, the more you're going to receive. And so it's something that I myself, healing a wounded masculine polarity, I had to work double down on listening to my thoughts and all of these belief systems that I was conditioned with when I was teaching myself to heal my wounded masculine energy polarity and really just dive into rest and relaxation as a tool to be more abundant,
Hmm.
as a tool to manifest and to be more productive, on the other side of it, it's difficult for us. It's so ingrained in us, men even worse. So
Yeah, you mentioned wounded masculine. So for those who are listening who might not have a concept of the feminine and the masculine, can you explain that?
absolutely. So within all of us, we have, and this has nothing to do with gender, we have energetics within us, one being, more feminine focused, one being more masculine focused. And I think we see this like we live in an era now where obviously the masculine energy is dominant, and the masculine energy really embodies action and the logic, the to-do lists, and all of that. And the feminine is about this like trusting, flowing, nurturing energy, right? It's about being. So you have one that's there to support you in your being, and you have one that supports you in your doing. And especially within my clients and even myself growing up, you notice that there is always one that will be stronger than the other depending on how the person had to what kind of environment the person grew up in will determine if you have more of a wounded feminine or a wounded masculine energy polarity, which means you might be more dominant on, let's say, for example, if you have a wounded feminine energy, you may really struggle with boundaries. You may struggle with procrastination. You'll struggle with, communication or really taking your place in the world. And whereas like a wounded masculine, she'll be more controlling, dominant. She'll struggle to get support, to receive, to delegate. You block your energy to receive, in
Mm.
essence, when you're more in your dominant masculine energy. And so the goal when you are on this like healing journey is to really create coherence between both and to create harmony where you can really understand on a day-to-day basis with self-awareness, am I being more in my feminine right now? Should I lean into more of my masculine so that I can get stuff done? Or, and so especially when you're working with like manifestation techniques, you have to learn how to embody both. A lot of people think like, for example, neural manifestation is just about creating a vision board and then kind of wishing for the best. And that's where you're like, okay, you're feminine there in the state of creation and you're visualizing it and you're trying to get stuff, out into the ether, but then you have to take aligned action. This is where your masculine side will come and support you, where you're like, here's my to-do list and I know what I need to do to get, the goalpost closer to the things that I want. I speak about the term manifestation, but in essence, it's just about like consciously creating your reality and getting things, into your own vortex, the things that you want. So, you know, put the meaning you want on the word manifestation. I think there's a lot of woo-woo that like comes with it, but the way that I teach it, I'm here to dispel the woo-woo. It's just really taking radical responsibility for your life. But yeah, sorry, I kind of pivoted to speaking about that when we were speaking about masculine versus feminine, but I think, just the foundations of it, I think you get the gist of, what they are in essence, like what role they can represent.
I feel like you're reading my mind because my next question was literally going to be about being in a state of being and relaxation, not equating to being passive. So when we think of, I love that you segued into this because when we think of manifestation, and sometimes when a lot of people think about letting their business or whatever they're creating breathe a little bit, people worry that the idea it's being passive. It's just hoping that the universe will create for exactly what you said. You are co-creating with the universe, working in tandem with it to create what is meant for you.
Exactly. And I think that's where you really have to learn to work with both of these energetics and create harmony between both and that begins with you healing them, right? Because I think a lot of us grew up in households where, I think sadly, I'm going to say that 99.9% of people, probably 100% at this point, we all have stuff that we need to heal. We're
Hmm.
all here on earth to unpack certain things that were passed on, things that block us in our opportunities and, just in our growth journey in general. And in, and us getting closer to that embodiment of the abundance mindset, if we can link everything back. And And I think once you start this process, then you realize, okay, I have to create that balance between the masculine and the feminine. So then you become a better conscious creator of your reality. But yeah, in essence, I think a lot of people really just try to see manifestation as like, I'm going to put it out on a piece of paper. I'm going to write down what I want and I'm going to put it on a vision board and then I'm going to hope for the best. But then they don't realize that, A, you got to take aligned action
Mm.
from the doing piece, but and then to add an extra layer to that, if you're not creating harmony within your own energetic container, you're not going to be able to call those things in. And I think that's where people then go on to thinking manifestation isn't real for me, therefore it's a crock of, but really it's just about understanding, number one, your subconscious mind is what is creating your reality, and that is working 24/7 even while you sleep. And so it's not that manifestation doesn't work, is that what you're manifesting, you feel like it's beyond your control and you think it's just, outside of you, and really it's not.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people just kind of hand over their power in this way, where they just say, well, it doesn't work. Look at all these negative things. But I'm like, yeah, but
Mhm.
that's what you're creating. You're creating it from a negative perspective because of your subconscious beliefs. And, for those of you who don't understand maybe like the difference between a conscious mind and a subconscious mind, think about an iceberg,
An iceberg and
like literally like out in Antarctica, those giant,
an
yeah,
iceberg.
right? Okay. So think about the top part that you see on the ocean floating, that's your conscious mind. But
Hmm.
the subconscious is all underwater, and that piece is a lot larger. That counts for 95% of your reality.
Mm.
And so people don't realize that all the stuff that's underwater, it's all hidden. You don't think it's still there taking up space or, really controlling your ability to call in, receive, etc. And then, once they start working with me, for example, they're like, holy crap, okay, I didn't realize that my inner child picked this belief up along the way.
Mm.
My inner child now believes that money is bad, or my inner child feels this, and I say the word inner child because in essence, your subconscious beliefs
Mm.
are created by your inner child. And your
Yeah.
humans now, most adults are operating from a program, right? The subconscious program that is designed by a 7-year-old.
Hmm.
And so if you're not upgrading that, it's your inner child that's really running the show.
Yeah, as you're talking, I'm thinking about my own experience with co-creation and really doing the work with my inner child. And even I speak on the inner teenager sometimes because
Oh,
that
absolutely.
girl, she ne she needs all the love she can get.
Exactly.
But when
Yeah.
I think about it, it's like sometimes we're not ready to take accountability for how much responsibility we have in our own life.
Yeah. Because then we have the ego that doesn't want to turn the mirror inward. It's easier to give our power away and to be like, this has nothing to do with me. But it's like, no, it has everything to do with you. And I love that you brought up the inner teenager. When I say inner child, it's like universal for every single little versions of you. As I do inner child work myself, it's been years and years and years. I think it's endless cycle. Not that it has to be exhausting or depleting all the time, but it's just, acknowledgement and working with those versions of you. But yeah, you're right. Sometimes it's the 29-year-old version of you that's there. Sometimes
Hmm.
it's the 22-year-old versions, and so you just have to understand what does that radical acceptance look like, and how can I begin to just, remove, peel off the layers of all of those belief systems that are still holding me back, today,
Yeah. How
which
did
is
you
it's really interesting actually. I worked in marketing my whole life. I am also a creative. I still do photography and creative work because I do love it. But I had a marketing agency in Toronto years ago before pandemic, and I was just sitting around at a table one day, and I was like, "Is this my life?" Like we're talking about fizzy water and how we're going to target like 5-year-olds to consume this product, and I felt very disconnected from the work
Mm.
because there was nothing deep about it. And I do carry a lot of depth. There's an extra layer to my work that I don't necessarily put out, but I am a Reiki practitioner now. Uh, I am in some form a channeler. So I channel energy and information through, sessions, through the body, through Reiki, through tarot.
Mhm.
So that's how it first really began, is like I had this gift that I knew that I was often suppressing. And then eventually I met somebody as I was, what we would call marketing Mel, a friend of mine. Well, she became a friend. The second she met me, she was a medium. She's a channeler and she's a healer. And she was like, marketing Mel, what are you doing? And I was like, what? She's like, whenever you're done hiding behind that identity, like, let me know. And then months later, she was hosting a Reiki certification for like the first two levels. And she reached out to me. And I had met this girl once. And she's like, you need to do this. And I was like, okay. I didn't even know what it was. And I studied, energetics. And that's when it just kind of opened up the floodgates. And then the pandemic hit. And so this is where I think, manifestation in some sort can also be manufactured by the universe in some form, because certain things I think are kind of just aligned for you or just predestined. And my whole business fell apart with the pandemic. My business, my relationship, everything was breaking down. I was losing everything. I had nothing left. I traveled to Mexico. That's where my boyfriend and I broke up. Actually, he
Okay.
left. I stayed. I
Hmm.
was still working in marketing, but I had found this marketing agency job because I was in event marketing. Everything on my end had shut down. And then I was starting to study energetics and things like that. And I was just realizing that my calling was just no longer about marketing. Through me taking this kind of courageous, aligned action of breaking up and leaving my whole life behind, and I decided to stay in Mexico, it's like there was this bigger force at play where universe just kept putting things in my way because I think I was choosing courage over comfort to bring me to the path of NLP. And then I ended up moving to Los Angeles, which is where I ended up studying neuro-linguistic programming and, really started diving deeper into just, the energetics of it and subconscious reprogramming techniques, hypnosis, and
Hmm.
just, then got into like all of the Joe Dispenza stuff and just, I've been studying neural manifestation, which is just a nice blend of like quantum physics and neuroscience, basically, and also working with universal laws. And that's what I've been studying now for the last months. But it was almost like a divine path. It was really crazy to me. It was just how everything just kept aligning. It wasn't really something that I thought deep down, oh, I want to study NLP. Everything just kept getting presented to me, like a series of stepping stones.
Mm. From
Mm.
my experience, it's like if I don't choose it, the universe will choose it for me. And I have not enjoyed the way that the universe chooses it sometimes. But sometimes we need that disruption to get us out of our comfort zones, to get out of the thing where we're playing it safe and step into where we're meant to be, the direction we're meant to go. As you were talking, I was thinking about the tower card. And
Oh, yeah.
so, for folks who aren't familiar with tarot, the tower, it looks like destruction, but it's truly in its essence, a space of clearing, clearing what no longer serves, clearing what isn't meant for you, what is not going to grow with you, and what's going to hinder you so that you can take those next steps forward.
Exactly. Breakdowns for me now is the biggest indicator that you're manifesting. You are making space for your new life to come in. The in between really feels uncomfortable because there is this period of breakdown where you haven't
Mhm.
maybe had the opportunity to see what's next kind of laid out in front of you. But, it is a pathway that's being created. And so for me, especially working with universal laws will help a lot of my clients and myself understand that, like, for example, universal law of polarity, which is like everything has this like equal part to it or an opposite. And so a breakdown just equals a breakthrough, and that's
Mhm.
on the same spectrum energetically, which is a beautiful thing. But yeah, when you're in it, it's not always good. Like you're like, okay, everything's falling apart. What am I holding on to? I'm trying to grasp
Mhm.
onto anything. But again, this is where surrender comes in. This is where the more you're going to work on your inherent self-worth and understand how the universe works, you're able to move with blind faith. And that's also going to help you consciously create what's next. So there's a lot of moving parts, but that's where you get tested, especially like people that are doing this kind of work. You're going to get tested the most because you have to start practicing what you preach, right? And so, oh yeah, I've been through the biggest breakdown, I think, of my life recently, where, it's like the rug is being pulled from underneath you and your whole life is crumbling apart. And I'm like, okay, I hadn't lived this since 2020, and now we're 2025. So I'm like, okay, if the trend is every 5 years, it's not so bad. But I'm like, when you're in it, sometimes it's like, you got to hold on. But again, right? Inherent self-worth, blind faith, and then choosing to consciously create your vision, I think, is the perfect trifecta that's going to really support you when you're going through this process.
Mm. Sounds like inherent blind faith is what anchors you in those moments of uncertainty.
Yeah, but that can't be fueled without inherent self-worth.
Say more on that.
Well, for me, one thing that I also teach is understanding the difference between inherent self-worth and self-confidence, because self-confidence, again, is a very masculine polarity thing if you almost look at it. It's very interesting how even we can identify these through the polarities. Inherent self-worth will be more of that being. I don't need anything to know my worth. I don't need a diploma. I don't need the money. I don't need the relationship. I get to just be and be the embodiment of feeling worthy simply because I exist, right? And so when you're initially born as a child, you're born inherently worthy. You don't see a baby being insecure about, walking around naked or whatever. They're like, I'm fabulous because I am, right? And this is,
Mhm.
you go back to more of that like concept of nothingness and just being. And then self-confidence is something that's acquired through the outside, is through doing, right? Once I have this diploma, I'll be really excited. I'll be really fulfilled. I'll be really satisfied. Once I have that relationship, I'll feel complete. And so these are all things that are living on the outside of us, whereas inherent self-worth is anchored in you. It's just a feeling that universe can strip away whatever from you. And you're like, I still know, right? Or you'll go through a breakup and someone will break your heart and you're like, it doesn't matter. This has nothing to do with my worth. Right. And so this is where inherent self-worth really comes in handy, because self-confidence is conditional. The second that something is taken away from you, whatever confidence I built because I acquired this thing is now removed. Right. And so that's a really big one where I think a lot of people are only taught to build confidence through the outside. And that really goes back to the abundance mindset. Are you operating on self-worth or are you operating on self-confidence most of your life?
Because
Yeah.
that just hit. And I think my listeners will really be able to sit with that distinction that you made of
Yeah.
confidence being conditional, self worth being, I mean, the truth is that you are worthy simply because you
You,
exist.
which is a beautiful affirmation.
You're good.
Yeah. And so again, right, it's just like the masculine versus the feminine. The feminine just being in this trusting, nurturing energy. What happens when everything is taken away from you? What happens when you go through a breakup or you go through a job loss? Are you going to really crumble and be like, I'm nothing, or, just becomes completely in distress and not trust the process, which means you've been thriving in your masculine, right? It's
Mhm.
all about the outside stuff. And so foundationally, when you're in your, what we call your divine feminine, you are inherently worthy. You can just, it's almost like the way I see it, it's like you're sitting on your lily pad. And I'm just like, it doesn't matter. I can just,
Mhm.
I still trust. I'm still nurturing to myself. I still know my worth. And
Mhm.
so, and then, working with the energetics too, where you're like, well, universe is moving things out of the way. It's just redirection. Let
Mhm.
me make space and let me trust the process and surrender. And that all comes from that divine feminine polarity. And so, yeah, that's a really big one that I think once you start mastering, consistently just the work of self-worth and working on that, that builds that's like the foundation, right? It's really just the foundation to everything else. And so especially just circling all of that back to an abundance mindset or showing up in your business,
Mm-hmm.
This is the important shadow work that you have to really integrate.
That shit's hard. I saying that is
From an NLP perspective, we're always listening to language. And so you got to stop saying it's hard.
fair, yes, but yes, yes, I own it. And thinking about the last couple of months, like for myself, I am going through a huge rebuilding transitional process right now and literally got ripped out of this job that I had no business being at in the first place. And as I was going through it, and while I was feeling these really heavy emotions around it, I kept reminding myself, I was like, but they didn't take anything from me. Like everything that I already had going in there, I still have it. And that was a real turning point for me because I had never really seen myself that way, but to sit with myself and say, okay, and like moving on to the thing, like moving on, being able to be in that space felt, it's something that no one can take away.
Exactly. And that's again the difference between self-confidence and inherent self-worth. And self-confidence, I also like to often associate it to how much of your ego is in that driver's seat, right? Because again, when you lose something like that, or either you go through job loss or whatever, your ego takes a hit, right? The ego always wants to be like, how dare you do this to me, right? It wants to be the victim. Oh, it's always the complainer and the victim. And it's just, but once you really also understand the difference between ego and higher self and those two different voices, it's just like everything begins to change because, yeah, you'll always work with the ego. The ego's, it's not about
Mhm.
ego death or eliminating it, but it's about building a conscious relationship with it so that when you go through these hardships, you hear your ego talk, all the BS that it wants to talk, but you kind of, get curious about it and you work with it, And I think a lot of people just try to either suppress it completely or they don't even understand the difference between ego and higher self. And so they believe every single thing that the ego is saying, and then they kind of spiral down.
Mhm.
It makes the whole process of moving through change a lot harder.
What's the first step you ask your clients to take when exploring their inherent self-worth?
Uh, in NLP, we have a lot of homework. So there's a lot of different things that you do. We do a lot of shadow work journaling, which will be like a series of questions that will get the person to thinking about their behaviors or how they take action and just create a pathway for them to understand like, oh, I see, like all of this is resulting to what I'm not really excited about. And so then we work on okay, we have a clear pathway then, from that journal session, let's say, and then it gets a little clearer after that, how we get to trace back the why. So
Mhm.
why are you doing it in this way? Okay, well, maybe this was shown to me by my mother or my caretaker or my teacher. And so we begin this process of really just it's like a funnel.
Mhm.
It's a funnel that you start to create and just really understand where everything comes from. And inherent self-worth for me is also built through EFT tapping, which is a really
Okay.
big method that I work with. I have actually an EFT tapping club. It's called the Wellness Club. It's a very cost-effective platform with hundreds of workshops that are in there. All of my clients are in there. So if you're doing privates with me, you're also like I will bully you into the wellness club. That's why I made it really cost effective because you got to go do the heavier lifting in between sessions, right? It's one
Mhm.
thing to speak about things and understand them, you're intellectualizing things, but then you have to change on the inside again, right? Going back to how do I build that abundance mindset?
Mhm.
You got to rewire your belief systems that are happening on the subconscious level and regulate your nervous system. And so EFT is a beautiful modality that not only helps you regulate your nervous system, it reduces cortisol levels by, half if you're consistent with it very quickly, but you also rewire your brain to new neural pathways. So if somebody grew up in a household where there was emotional neglect, which I think most of us grew up in that capacity because it doesn't take much to experience emotional neglect,
Mhm.
child's perspective, where a child, you know this, they think in ultimates. They think from 0 to 100, they don't have
Mhm.
discernment. So the second that dad is working too much or doesn't really get too comfortable with saying, I love you, the child is already experiencing emotional neglect, right? And so, you have to go address and rewire all of that. And so EFT, what we're doing is exactly that. You have to change, the way that the brain fires up on a neurological level if you want real change. And so EFT, I would say, and a lot of shadow work are the two main things that will help you build inherent self-worth.
Mhm. Early.
Is
Huh.
aligned action, right? Boundaries is the big one. That also helps your brain understand that you're choosing a different pathway.
You
Mhm.
mentioned the full name earlier, but what is an NLP?
It stands for neuro linguistic programming. And so we really work with rewiring your subconscious. Obviously, there's a process of identifying the subconscious beliefs first. Then we work with techniques that will help you rewire it. And we're really just neurologically changing how your brain operates and building those new neural pathways depending on what your goals are. When I was listening to you speak, we also work with how the power of language and words really impact your reality, right? Because
Mhm.
those words don't come from nowhere. We're choosing them because there's a deep rooted belief that is tied to it. And all of that creates your reality. And so we really work with reframing your mind through these techniques. And then, as well,
Mhm.
language, the way that you speak about things will also create either the scarcity or the abundance mindset. And people don't realize, right? We're always just talking, talking, talking. We were speaking of something and you said, but it's really hard. But that is creating an energetic anchor in how you are now perceiving this in your reality, and you're creating an identity with it. And so we work
Mhm.
where it's just like your awareness really becomes your superpower through how you speak of things and how you get to reframe them in order for you to take your power back and really move towards change.
Mm. I love this conversation so much. Thank you so much for your time and being willing to share with my audience. How can people get connected with you if they want to learn more?
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to share the link to my either my social platforms. People, you just email me or you could DM me, and I always offer clients like a free exploration call just to see if we're a good fit, depending on what their goals are. In essence, my clients are here to work with me on a variety of different things, whether it's to improve their relationships or to improve their own relationship to self because they feel like they have, struggles with anxiety or just that scarcity mindset or procrastination. And so there's a plethora of different things that we work on. But yeah, I mean, email works, whatever social channels you want to share, I'm there, I'm always available. So
Absolutely. All of her links will be linked in the show notes. And then, as a closer, I'm asking all of my guests, what is your commitment to yourself for 2025?
my big word is actually collaboration. That's my bigger commitment. I would say is how to embody more of that collaborative energy and working with more people in order to receive more.
I love that. Well, thank
I'm
you for
somebody
working with me today.
recovering, we're coming from somebody who's a recovering, very wounded masculine energy polarity where I thought I had to do everything myself. I did realize through time that there is something beautiful about collaborations. And so the second I got back home, that's what I've been doing. I'm just partnering up. I'm happy to be here through this process too with you. And so, yeah, that's a really big thing for me is just, collaboration.
There's so much power in it. And as someone who also finds strength in my own independence, I'm only better when I allow myself to be in collaboration and community with others.
Goes back to the abundance mindset as well. When you are in that collaborative energy, it's an energy of receiving. And when we try to do everything on our own, that's often a trauma response, hyper independence. And
Hmm.
so really you have to break that because it also blocks you from receiving. So big theme for
Absolutely.
me this year is just, yeah, finding new ways to get out there and really just serve at large through collaboration.
Well, thank you for joining me today.
It was such a pleasure to connect with you.
Thank you all so much for tuning into this episode. Make sure you tap the bell to stay in the loop with new episodes dropping every Friday. If this episode spoke to you, I'd be so grateful if you left a review. It helps others find the show and reminds me why I keep showing up. And if you want to keep the conversation going, come hang with me on socials at Healing with Jazzmyn. We're healing out loud together.